New Year's Eve at my company always felt like a performance, not the fun kind. The kind where leadership rented a downtown venue, put up a photo wall with our logo, and acted like the year had been a victory, even when everyone in the hall knew the truth. We were cutting costs, trimming teams, and pretending it was focus. I wasn't supposed to be there. I almost skipped it. I'd been getting that quiet treatment for months. The calendar invites that didn't include me, the projects I built that got presented without my name, the meetings where my boss would say, "We'll circle back," and then never did. But my wife told me to go anyway. "Show your face," she said. "Don't give them the satisfaction of you disappearing first." So I went. I put on the one blazer I kept for corporate events. I walked into a room full of fairy lights and forced laughter, and I tried to pretend I wasn't already tired. I'd been with the company long enough to remember when it was smaller and scrappier, when people still argued in meeting rooms because they cared. Now every disagreement happened in private, and every compliment happened in public. My boss, Rick, was floating through the room like a politician, handshakes, shoulder pats, the same grin he used when he wanted something, and the same tone he used when he needed to sound compassionate while doing something ruthless. Rick loved the word alignment. He used it like perfume. I was standing near the bar, watching him work the room, when I noticed HR had shown up. Not just the generalist who smiled at everyone, the director-level HR partner, the kind of person who didn't attend parties unless something was being finalized. That should have been my first warning, but I was still trying to be normal, still trying to tell myself I was overthinking. Because paranoia is how you lose your mind in corporate life, by noticing patterns and then convincing yourself you're seeing ghosts. A few coworkers came up to me. They were friendly in the careful way people get when they sense smoke. One guy from operations asked how my new year was looking. A woman from finance asked if I was excited for what's coming. Nobody asked what I was working on. They didn't ask because they already knew. I took a sip of the drink I didn't even want and listened to the music thumping through the speakers. Too loud for real conversation, loud enough to drown out accountability. And then Rick climbed onto the small stage. He tapped the microphone, smiled, and waited for the room to quiet down like he was about to announce a promotion or a bonus. Someone handed him a champagne flute. He raised it like a trophy. "We did incredible work this year," he said. "We pushed through a lot. We delivered. We proved ourselves." People cheered. People always cheered. That's what corporate crowds do. Clap first, think later. Rick kept going. He talked about growth, efficiency, and momentum. He threw in a joke about doing more with less, like it was a motivational poster instead of a warning. Then he paused. He scanned the room, and his eyes found me. It was subtle, but I felt it like a cold hand on the back of my neck. Rick smiled wider. "Tonight," he said, "I also want to address something openly, because transparency matters." A couple people laughed like it was already funny. Rick held the microphone a little closer. "You all know we're heading into a tighter year. We have to be smart. We have to cut what doesn't scale." The HR director stood off to the side, smiling, hands folded. She looked relaxed, like this had been rehearsed. Rick said my name, not casually, not in passing. He said it the way someone says a headline. My stomach dropped, but I didn't move. I didn't give him anything. Years of dealing with him had taught me that reactions were currency. Rick tilted his head like he was about to praise me, and then he laughed. "We're replacing him," Rick said into the microphone. "He's too expensive." For half a second there was silence. Real silence. The kind that exists before people decide what they're allowed to feel. Then the room erupted. Not everyone, but enough. A wave of laughter, clapping, whistles. Like he'd just made a roast joke at my expense and I was supposed to stand up and bow. I stood there holding my drink, feeling the heat in my face, hearing my own heartbeat under the music. I remember thinking, this is a termination. Not official, not on paper, but socially. The kind that makes you radioactive before you even leave. Rick kept smiling, feeding off it. It's nothing personal, he added, like that phrase has ever meant anything. Just business. We're all adults here. More laughter. I looked around the room and saw a dozen different reactions. Some people were uncomfortable and staring at their shoes. Some were smiling because they didn't want to be the only ones not smiling. And a few were watching me with the kind of interest you reserve for accidents on the highway. The HR director never stopped smiling. That was the part that hit me hardest. Not Rick, not his ego, not the applause. HR was there. HR heard it. HR endorsed it with her face. My hands stayed steady, but inside I was splitting into two people. One who wanted to walk out and never come back, and another who was already flipping through every email, every meeting note, every blocked approval in my head like a filing cabinet. Because something didn't add up. If they were truly just replacing me, they would have done it quietly. They would have scheduled a short call, used the words "role eliminated," handed me a severance packet, and sent me home like thousands of companies do every day. They wouldn't do it on a stage, on a holiday, in front of witnesses. Public humiliation wasn't necessary for cost-cutting. Public humiliation was necessary for something else. I didn't know what yet, but I knew it existed, because Rick was the kind of man who never chose a method unless it served him twice. I set my drink down and walked toward the hallway outside the main room, where the music softened and the air felt cooler. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, then again, and again. I pulled it out, expecting a text from my wife asking when I'd be home. Instead, I saw a name I recognized from one of our largest clients. I hadn't heard from him directly in weeks. The message was short. "Are you available tonight? We have a problem." And in that moment, standing outside the party while my boss celebrated my replacement inside, I realized the truth was going to be uglier than a layoff. Because if they were erasing me in public, it meant something important was about to fail in private. I stared at the client's message while the party thumped behind me, bass shaking the walls like nothing in my life had just changed. "Are you available tonight? We have a problem." That client didn't text people casually. He ran a delivery team that measured downtime in real money and angry executives. If he was reaching out on New Year's Eve, it meant something was already on fire. I typed back, "I can take a look. What's happening?" 3 dots. Then his reply came in fast. "Your integration job is failing. Our nightly run didn't complete. We're getting bad data on the dashboard. We go live after the holiday." My integration job, the same one Rick had been pushing to ship faster all quarter. The same one I'd been warning needed a final sign-off and a rollback plan. The same one he'd quietly pulled me out of meetings for while still expecting me to own it. I walked farther down the hallway until I couldn't hear the music. My hands were steady, but my jaw hurt from clenching. "Can you send me the error?" I asked. The client forwarded a screenshot. It was exactly what I expected. A permissions failure. Something had changed upstream, and the job was trying to hit an endpoint it no longer had access to. Normally, this would be annoying, but solvable. You open the ticket, you pull the logs, you adjust the service account, you rerun. But I was standing outside my own company party, freshly humiliated on a stage, and I had no idea if I still had access to anything. I opened my work phone. The VPN app still showed me connected. I tried the monitoring dashboard. It loaded. I tried the deployment console. It loaded too. So they hadn't cut me off yet. Not fully. Not the way you do when you're replacing someone. I called the client back, stepped into a quiet stairwell, and listened to him explain the timeline. He was controlled, but I heard the edge in it, the kind of edge that says people above him were already asking who to blame. "I can stop the bleeding," I told him, "but I need you to do one thing for me. Put your request in writing. Email me that you need support tonight." He hesitated. "Why?" "Because I was just told publicly that I'm being replaced." I said, "If I'm going to touch anything, I want it documented that you asked for it." There was a pause, then a low exhale. "Understood. I'll send it." He did. Subject line, urgent. Integration job failing. Requesting your assistance tonight. That one email didn't fix the problem, but it did something better. It locked reality in place. I spent the next hour triaging the failure, messaging the on-call channel, and pushing the simplest safe workaround. Route the job through the stable endpoint. Rerun the pipeline. Keep the dashboard clean until we could implement the proper fix. The client calmed down. The graphs turned green. The errors stopped screaming. And for a short, satisfying moment, I felt the old version of myself come back. The guy who kept things upright while other people played politics. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't the client. It was Rick. Need you to jump on something. Call me. No mention of the party. No apology. No explanation. Like he hadn't just made me a joke in front of 200 people. I didn't call. He texted again. This is important. Don't make this difficult. That line hit a nerve. Because don't make this difficult was always what they said when they were about to make your life difficult on purpose. I walked out of the stairwell, straight past the photo wall, straight past the laughter, and out into the cold night. I drove home with the heater blasting, my mind replaying the stage moment, like a loop I couldn't shut off. My wife was asleep when I got in. I didn't wake her. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop, not to work, just to think. At around midnight, an HR invite hit my inbox. A meeting for the next morning. Title, Quick Sync. No agenda, no notes. Just HR and Rick listed as required attendees. I stared at it and felt something inside me harden. Not fear, not even anger. More like clarity. Because Quick Sync wasn't a conversation. It was a script. And I finally understood why Rick had done it publicly. He didn't want a private termination. He wanted a public narrative. He wanted the room to accept the story before the paperwork existed. I accepted the invite anyway, not because I planned to cooperate, because I planned to listen, because whatever they were about to do next, I wanted it in a calendar invite, in an email chain, in a format I could prove later. I went to bed for a couple of hours. When I woke up, my phone already had new messages. Operations, sales, a project manager I barely knew, all asking some version of the same question. Are you online? Can you help? Do you own the run book? I didn't answer yet. I just watched the screen light up again and again, and I realized something that made my stomach turn. They were already acting like I was responsible. And I didn't know it yet, but that decision to humiliate me in public was about to cost them everything. The first workday after the holiday, I woke up before my alarm like my body already knew what was coming. My phone was face down on the nightstand, but I could feel it buzzing through the wood. When I flipped it over, there were new messages stacked on top of each other. Operations, sales, a project manager I'd met once in a hallway. People weren't asking how I was. They were asking if I was online, if I could jump in, if I still owned the pipeline. I didn't reply. I got up quietly, made coffee I barely tasted, and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The HR invite was still there, sitting in my calendar like a trap with a polite name. Quick Sync, no agenda, no context. Just HR, Rick, and me. I clicked into my work portal and started pulling anything I might need later. My last performance review, the written praise from the client team, the notes from the quarterly planning doc, where I'd flagged the exact risk we were now living in. I downloaded the change requests I'd submitted that never got approved. I saved the email threads where I asked for sign-off and got nothing but silence. Not company secrets, not some dramatic theft, just my own paper trail, proof that I'd been doing my job while other people were staging narratives. Then I joined the call. Rick was already there, camera on, wearing the same calm smile he'd worn on stage. HR was there too. Andrea, the director-level partner, camera on, posture perfect, expression warm in that practiced way that never reaches the eyes. "Morning," Andrea said. "Thanks for joining on short notice." Rick nodded like we were starting a normal meeting, like he hadn't used a microphone to turn me into entertainment. Andrea spoke first, reading from a script that had been written to sound humane. "Due to business needs and restructuring," she said, "your role is being eliminated. This is not a performance issue." I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I let her finish, because interruptions become behavior, and behavior becomes justification. She continued, "We have a severance package prepared, standard paperwork, release agreement. We'll also need to confirm return of equipment and access." Rick leaned in slightly. "And we want this to be smooth," he added, voice soft, like he was doing me a favor. "No hard feelings." I stared at him through the screen and waited for the part where someone acknowledged what happened at the party. Nobody did. Andrea clicked to the next section of her script. "We also have a transition expectation." That phrase landed like a stone. "Transition," I repeated, calm. "I thought my role was eliminated." "It is," Rick said immediately, too fast. "But there are a few items only you have familiarity with. We need you to support a handoff." Andrea's smile didn't change. "This is common," she said. "Just a short period to ensure continuity." I felt my stomach turn, not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed everything I'd been suspecting since the stage. They wanted me erased and available at the same time. They wanted the optics of cutting the expensive employee, while keeping the liability attached to my name long enough to survive the next launch. And if anything went wrong in that gap, they already had a story ready. He owned it. He was difficult. He was too expensive. We had to replace him. I kept my voice even. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Rick slid into the answer like he'd practiced it. "Be on standby. Answer questions. Provide guidance. We'll loop in the replacement once we finalize." "Finalize," I said, "so you don't have a replacement yet." Rick's smile tightened. "We're close." Andrea jumped in smooth. "It won't be long. We'll outline expectations in an email." I waited a beat. "Before I agree to anything, I need two things in writing. A clear scope of what you want me to do, and confirmation that I will retain the access required to do it." Rick's tone shifted. "Access is handled separately. You won't need much." That was the tell. I'd already seen the client's screenshot. I knew the failure was a permissions issue. You cannot support something you can't see, and you definitely can't be responsible for it. "I'm not providing transition support without access," I said, "and I'm not signing anything today without reviewing it." Andrea's smile thinned, but she kept it. "That's your right. We'll send the documents for review." Rick looked irritated now, the mask slipping just enough. "Let's not make this adversarial," he said. I heard it again in my head. "Don't make this difficult." And that morning, something in me finally broke cleanly instead of cracking. That morning, I stopped being the hero. I wasn't going to save people who were actively building a story where my rescue would become my confession. I kept my tone professional. "Send me the severance packet and the transition request in writing. I'll respond once I've reviewed." Andrea nodded. "Understood. After this call, your access will be disabled. You'll receive an email with next steps." There it was, clean and quiet. Rick gave one last smile. "I appreciate your cooperation," he said, like he'd earned it. The call ended. My laptop sat there for a second, the screen reflecting my face back at me. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity so sharp it almost hurt. I opened my inbox and created a folder named with the date, then another folder inside it. Approvals. Another. Requests. Another. Risks. Flagged. I started building a timeline, not because I was plotting revenge in some dramatic way, but because I could already see where this was headed. If the launch failed, they would say it was me. If the client escalated, they would say I didn't cooperate. If the board asked questions, they would offer my name like a shield. And then, as if on cue, my work apps started logging me out, one by one. Email, gone. Chat, gone. Dashboard, gone. My phone buzzed again, a text from operations. "Hey, urgent, are you able to get into the monitoring console? We're seeing errors again." I stared at the message for a long moment, thumb hovering above the keyboard. Outside, the day was quiet. Inside my chest, everything was rearranging itself into something colder and more deliberate. I typed back only one sentence. I don't have access anymore. Please loop HR and Rick and send the request in writing. A minute passed. Then my phone buzzed again, this time from Rick. Call me, now. But that was just the beginning. Rick kept calling. I let it ring the first time, then the second, then a third. Each call felt less like urgency and more like panic, trying to sound like authority. Finally, a voicemail came through. I didn't listen to it right away. I just watched the notification sit there, heavy and unread, while my phone lit up with messages from people who had never needed me until the moment my access was removed. Operations, we can't reach the endpoint. Monitoring is red. Sales, client escalation, they're asking for you by name. A program manager, do you have the run book? We can't find it. I didn't answer the questions in chat. I replied the same way to each one, short and clean. I was terminated this morning. I no longer have access. Please route all requests through HR and my former manager. That wasn't me being petty. That was me refusing to become the unofficial owner of a system I wasn't allowed to touch. Corporate life teaches you that the moment you do unpaid work after termination, it stops being help and becomes responsibility. And Rick wanted responsibility. He wanted my hands on the mess so my fingerprints would be on whatever happened next. I listened to his voicemail then. His voice was controlled, but I heard the strain under it. Hey, we have a situation. Call me back immediately. We just need you to walk us through a couple things. This is time sensitive. No apology. No acknowledgement of the party. Not even a fake, how are you holding up? Just need. Just urgency. Just entitlement. My wife came into the kitchen with her hair still messy from sleep and looked at me like she already knew something had gone wrong. Is this about last night? She asked. I nodded. She sat down quiet. Did they actually do it? They did it publicly, I said, and they did it again in a meeting this morning. Her face tightened. And now they're calling you? I turned my phone so she could see the missed calls. She stared for a second and then said something that stuck with me. They're not calling because they feel bad. They're calling because they need you. She was right. A new email hit my personal inbox a few minutes later from Andrea in HR. She must have dug it up from my records. Subject: next steps. Inside was the severance packet and the release agreement. Very clean, very standardized. A couple weeks of pay, continuation of benefits for a short period, and the part they cared about most, the release language. The part that said I wouldn't sue, wouldn't speak, wouldn't disparage. And then, in the middle of that email, a separate attachment, subject line in bold, transition support acknowledgement. It was one page. It thanked me for supporting business continuity during the transition period, and then it listed expectations in a way that made my skin crawl. Be available for questions. Provide guidance on critical systems. Assist with incident resolution. Confirm continuity of operations. And at the bottom, a line that was designed to sound harmless, but wasn't. By signing, you acknowledge responsibility for ensuring accurate knowledge, transfer related to the systems you own. Owned. Past tense in the termination, present tense in the liability. That was the trap. Because if I signed that paper and something failed, they could say I acknowledged responsibility. They could imply I withheld information. They could claim I sabotaged a handoff. They could drag me into their narrative with my own signature. I didn't even argue. I didn't get emotional. I forwarded the email to myself again, saved it, and replied with 2 sentences. I will review the severance agreement. I will not sign any document assigning responsibility for systems I no longer have access to. Polite, professional, final. 3 minutes later, Rick's number called again. I let it ring out. Then Andrea called. I let that ring too. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Rick that dropped the mask entirely. You're putting the company at risk. get on a call. I stared at that line and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not fear, not anger, certainty. Because that sentence wasn't a request, it was the start of blame. I replied carefully, one text, no emotion. I'm not authorized to access systems. Please communicate requests through legal counsel in writing. A few minutes passed. Then the client called me directly. I answered that one because I owed them clarity and because I wanted a clean record of what was happening. His voice sounded tight. We're down again, hard. They're saying you're not cooperating. I kept my tone calm. I was terminated. My access was removed. I cannot legally or technically do the work without authorization and access. There was a pause. Then, they told us you're the owner. I was the builder, I said. Ownership inside their systems is an administrative label. It doesn't mean I still have access. If you want this resolved, tell them to re-enable access formally, or assign someone with credentials. And please put that request in an email. He exhaled through his nose like he was trying to keep himself from saying something unprofessional. This is unbelievable. Also, I added, if anyone claims I refuse support, ask them to forward you the written transition plan and the access confirmation. Because I asked for both, I received neither. That changed the tone. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said slower, send me that in writing. So I did. I wrote a short, factual email to him. I was terminated on the morning after New Year's Eve. My access was disabled. I cannot support incidents without written authorization, scope, and access. I requested those items. They were not provided. Clean, factual, no emotion. When I hit send, my phone stopped buzzing for about 10 minutes. Then it started again, faster this time. Not just Rick and HR, legal. A number I didn't recognize called twice, then sent a text. This is company counsel, please call. I didn't call. I replied, please email me. A minute later, an email arrived from a legal address with a polite greeting and a not-so-polite attachment. An updated transition document. This version was shorter. The dangerous sentence had been reworded, still slippery but less blatant. And in the email body, one line stood out. We request that you sign the attached attestation confirming you have not retained any company materials and will support transition inquiries in good faith. Attestation. There it was. Not severance. Not release. Not kindness. An attestation designed to bind me while they kept the story that I was too expensive and disposable. I read it twice, then once more, slow, and then I realized the real leverage I had wasn't anger. It wasn't threats. It was the timeline. Because if legal was involved this fast, it meant the client escalation had already reached leadership. And if leadership was scared, it meant Rick's story was already collapsing. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I opened my folder again, the one I'd started that morning, and I added a new subfolder, public statement. Inside, I saved one thing, a screenshot of Rick's text. You're putting the company at risk. Because in corporate life, the person who panics first is the person who leaves fingerprints. And Rick was panicking. That night, as the calls kept coming, I didn't respond with emotion. I responded with structure. I drafted a single email addressed to HR and legal, and I made it as boring as possible. Because boring is what holds up in front of executives. I listed 3 items: written scope, written authorization, restored access. And I ended it with one line that felt like flipping a switch. Until these conditions are met, I cannot participate in incident response or transition work. I hit send, and then for the first time since the party, I felt calm, because I could finally see the shape of the ending. If they wanted to blame me, they had to bring me back in. If they brought me back in, they had to explain why they humiliated me in public. And once that explanation started, the whole thing would unravel. The only question left was how far Rick would go to save himself. And the next message I received answered it. The next morning, the calls stopped. Not because the fire was out, because someone higher up had stepped into the room and changed the rules. At 8, I got an email from HR with a new subject line. Revised meeting, please join. Legal was copied. So was the interim CIO. No quick sync, no script language. Just, we need to discuss immediate business continuity. Please join at 9. I joined from my kitchen table. The moment the call connected, I knew Rick wasn't running it anymore. The interim CIO, Mark, spoke first, calm, direct, exhausted. Thanks for joining, he said. First, the way this was handled was inappropriate. Rick's camera was on. His face didn't move, but his eyes did. Mark continued. Second, we have an active client escalation. Third, we have governance questions about system ownership and access. We're going to resolve the operational issue. Then we're going to address the people issue. He asked one question. Do you currently have access to the systems in question? No, I said. My access was disabled after my termination call. And you have not performed any work since access was removed? Correct. I requested written scope, authorization, and access. I did not receive them. Mark nodded. Thank you. Then he turned to HR. Confirm. Was he terminated? Yes, Andrea said. Role elimination. Mark looked at legal. Confirm. Did we ask him to sign anything assigning responsibility after termination? Legal cleared his throat. There was a transition acknowledgement drafted. Acknowledging responsibility? I added neutral. Without access? That sentence landed. In a room like that, facts weigh more than anger. Mark's tone stayed flat. Here's what will happen. We'll issue a short-term consulting agreement, effective immediately, with defined scope and hourly compensation. We will restore access under a temporary account, audited by security. You will not sign any attestation of ownership for past decisions. You will provide incident support only within scope. Agreed? For the first time since the party, someone was speaking in real terms. I'll review the agreement, I said. If it's clean and specific, yes. The only thing I asked for before I touched anything was a written statement that my access had been removed at the company's direction and that I had not refused support. Legal sent it within minutes. They were protecting the company, but for once, that protection worked in my favor. Security restored access within the hour. And the moment I logged in, the picture became obvious. The system still listed me as the administrative owner, but the service account had been rotated during the holiday freeze without updating dependencies. The pipeline failed exactly where I had warned it would fail. The fix wasn't dramatic. It was controlled. I pulled the logs. I documented the failure. I wrote the change request. Mark approved it in writing. Then I executed the fix and reran the jobs. Green checks rolled down the dashboard like a slow exhale. The client calmed down. Their escalation thread went quiet. Sales stopped sounding like they were holding their breath. When the incident report went to leadership, it included my log excerpts, my risk notes, and the exact timestamp my access was disabled. The board didn't need drama. They needed a clear answer to a clear question. Why did a too expensive employee still show up as owner in production the same day he was terminated? Nobody could answer that without pointing at Rick. That afternoon, Mark asked for the timeline. We got on a second call. Mark, legal, HR, compliance. Rick was there too, but he barely spoke. Every time he tried to steer the story, someone asked for the written record. I didn't accuse. I didn't rant. I walked them through what I had. Approval requests that sat unanswered, risk notes I'd documented, my removal from key meetings, the public statement at the party, and the attempt to push a responsibility document after termination. When I finished, Mark said, "That's sufficient." 2 days later, HR emailed, my termination was rescinded, effective immediately, pending review for process irregularities. A week after that, Mark offered me a new role under a different reporting line, with written protection around access and ownership assignments. I accepted, not for revenge, for stability. Rick didn't look at me in the hallway anymore. 2 weeks later, there was an all hands. No party. No jokes. Mark talked about leadership conduct and risk. He didn't name Rick, but he didn't have to. Later that day, Rick's calendar went blank. By Friday, his title disappeared from the org chart. No announcement, no microphone, no applause. Just a quiet removal. The same kind of erasure he'd tried to do to me. That night, my wife and I ate dinner at our kitchen table. And for the first time in weeks, my phone didn't buzz. I thought about the moment on that stage, the laughter, the heat in my face, and I realized something that surprised me. They had been right about one thing. I was expensive, not because of my salary. Because when you build the thing that holds the company together, the cost of pretending you're disposable is always higher than anyone wants to pay.